In our last conversation with Mpho Makwana, he shared with us what inspires and motivates him, and his deep passion for developing and growing others. He spoke fondly of the many mentors in his life and how they helped shape his personal purpose and passion. Today, I ask him about his personal sense of hope and optimism and how he manages to remain focused and disciplined as he navigates life complexities. So, Mpho, thank you so much. We've had phenomenal two phenomenal conversations, and it's given me so many questions. I'm thinking, you shared in your conversation now, that you're an introvert, and I'm a strong introvert as well, and and I wonder whether extroverts can appreciate what it's like for an introvert, whether you get these layers of questions that go into your mind. And I've been thinking about, we've been talking about heritage and legacy and journey, and at the back of my mind, almost a reflection of the kind of weather we've had today. Woke up this morning and it was dark and grey and gloomy, and the sun has now come out, and we've got this beautiful autumn afternoon, and it talks about seasons and cycles and the ups and downs of life. And it triggered me to think about a poem that I very often go to, and I use in a lot of my coaching and facilitation, and it's by a Canadian-born author called Oriah Mountain Dreamer, and the poem is called The Invitation. And I bring it into our facilitation sessions, particularly when we want to talk about the fact that leadership is more than just title and position. It really asks you to consider what's at your core. And who is this individual? What is it that is at your core that allows you to manage those ups and downs that we have in our life? So I want to read a line from the poem to you. And I want to read it because I do want to be true to the author and make sure that I have the words in the right way. She says in the poem, The Invitation, I want to know if you can see beauty, even when it's not pretty, every day. And if you can source your own life from its presence. So my question to you is, how do you, because this is something that I've really appreciated about our interactions, is your sense of calm and hope and optimism. And I look to you for advice and counsel when the dark clouds are swirling above my head. How do you remain hopeful and optimistic when those dark clouds are on the horizon?
It's something that has been both natural, inlearned, and maybe it's just something that I carried with me into the universe. You have to, if you look back to the first time as a child, let's say, Mr. Campbell used to have these big dogs in his house, and we had dogs in our homes in the village. But if you think back to the first reaction you had when you're looking at this dog, not knowing whether it's going to bite you, whether it's going to be friendly, it's moments like those that how you come out of it, probably as a child, I'm just inferring, help you overcome bigger and bigger and bigger fears as you grow. If you look at one of the tools that I use, the human pin code, I'm a 7 by personality, having arrived on the 7th day of the month that I arrived in. And 7 people generally are deeply spiritual people. They constantly seek depth. People often ascribe to me that they have had to acclimatize to the fact that when they ask me a question, they don't get short answers, because it comes with that perhaps gift of always thinking deeply about things and looking at them from a depth point of view. But when you are a person of faith, as in following a certain religion, you also then, if you're true to it, it helps you to navigate challenges. As I said to you 2 conversations prior, that in the faith that I grew up in, we believe that you create your heaven or your earth in this lifetime. And it determines how you're going to exit your life into the next. There's also a belief which comes from the Bible that everybody reads, in the Old Testament, in the book of Isaiah, where there's a text that reminds us that we need to know that we're an embodiment of God. Yeah. So in the faith that I belong to, God does not dwell in the blue skies. Yeah. God dwells inside of you. And so the same notion comes later when Paul is asked, but you're telling people about this Christ that you never met. Because of the proponents of Christianity, he was never a disciple. Yes. He came much later. He says, yeah, now I hear you. You talk about Peter and others, about the Christ that you used to spend physical time with. I'm talking about the one that dwells in me. Even the formulation of words, the prime mover is him. Yes. So if you have a faith that inculcates in you, I've grew up with this philosophy since age 7, in you that your locus of control power is within you, then in a very natural way you learn to embrace the fact that I can overcome anything as long as I draw from my internal strength. It's like the Buddhist faith, where similarly they chant mantras, they meditate because they're trying to tap into the power within. So I would think that that's where the source of calm comes from. Then as you, again, as we were talking earlier about libraries and books, as you learn more and read more literature, you then, because your vibration draws you, yes, to more of these kind of energies. Most pieces of work I've read over and above the scriptures also talk about how you then learn to use the power of observation, the power of filtering, and knowing what to respond to or what not to respond to. An elderly person in my family, and later, I think you will remember Colin Hall when we talk about Stephen Covey, where he used to run sessions in Mount Grace. Out of the blue, we were doing an exercise where you get blindfolded, yes, and you have to follow someone. It was a journey about trust. So at the end of it, apparently, as I was blindfolded, I followed obediently, yes, and came out well on the other side, when others were arguing with their guides, saying, no, it should be a stair here or this or the other. So there was this Irish couple that appeared to be on holiday at Mount Grace. Okay. So as we end, and as I took off the blindfold, and people were saying, oh, well done, well done. This middle-aged, must have been in his mid-50s, comes to us, says in a very rich Irish accent, says, "What are you all doing here?" And we say, no, it's a leadership session and so on. He says, oh. Then he looks the other way, and then he turns back. He says, and which one of you is a servant? And we look at each other, we laugh. He says, that's the trick. So as we walk away, he says, he looks at me, he says, there's something about you, some old soul energy about you. And then he walked away. And I didn't know him, I don't know who he was. And a few members of my family have articulated the same, that they feel that around me, they feel like they're dealing with an old soul. I've had the rare, perhaps, opportunities I was saying in our much earlier first conversation. I've always been surrounded by grandparents, older people around me. And somehow, even as a child, I could converse with them. I had more time for the elderly than my peers. Yeah. And so perhaps something rubbed off, I don't know, but it seems to have been something that came as a natural gift, something inculcated, and something perhaps nurtured early in life.
Have you ever experienced failure?
I believe I have. I have experienced failure at school. I have experienced failure when I was first seriously detained politically in my matric year. I didn't write my matric. I had to, it was on the 16th of July when we were detained, and we were released under the state of emergency regulations on the 5th of December. So couldn't write matric, so I had to restart my matric the following year. And dealing with failure, two anchors always guided me. In the spiritual realm, there's a scripture that says that God doesn't make a mistake. The painful and the pleasant both come from God. Generally, people tend to think that, or in some spiritual context, when people experience the negative, they think it's the devil testing them. And when people experience the positive, it's God blessing them. So we, in our teachings that we were taught, groomed and raised with, there's a scripture that says God speaks to humanity through misery. Such acute pain and misery breeds experience. And experience breeds hope, and there's no shame in hope. So you deal with failure by always saying, what is it teaching me? And you embrace the learnings. And because there's no shame in hope, you keep on going forward. In one of the leadership books I read, I was about 25, 26, on my executive management journey, is a book that talks about life in the Greek culture as being filled with kairos moments. Yes. So every obstacle you meet, every brick wall you hit is a kairos moment. There's one or two companies where I only ever spent 9 months in, because I just felt like every day was a brick wall. Yeah. The culture was disempowering. The culture just didn't have good sense of values. It was more wheeling and dealing than actually being part of something. And the organizations where I've spent 3 years, the organizations where I've spent 9 years, 10 years. And so there was a time when some of my mentors called me a job hopper, because I would spend 9 months here, 18 months there. And in their mind, I was leading myself down a career path of failure. Yet, when I look back, based on the grooming that I've had and the self-learning that I've had with the example of the Kairos Moment books. Every little experience you have adds up later. When I first became chair of ESCOM in 2009, in the build-up to the 2010 FIFA World Cup, I found that everything I had learned about people, about general management, about finance, about systems, about scenario thinking, tended to converge in one role. Even the challenging experiences I had in those 9-month stints somehow converged. And so you've got to have perhaps it's a rare gift, but the gift to appreciate at the back of your mind that even the painful moments you go through, even the moments of rejection that you may feel people are shutting doors on you at a particular time, it's life lessons. Later, they come handy and of course, you don't feel the learning at the time.
Yes.
You feel dejected, you feel unaccepted, you feel unloved, whatever negative energy you can associate with. Once you've gone over the hill, somehow it shows up as a learning.
How do you get over the hill, though? Because there are individuals that very often get trapped in that space of feeling dejected. And that's where they live, is in that emotion. So is it just a question of time, or is there something that you do specifically and consciously to move yourself forward?
I must say, I've never felt stuck. I've always had the understanding that it's temporary. And so you find ways of coping in that moment. Whether you end up finding tennis balls as an outlet, whether you end up finding meditation as an outlet, you've got to focus yourself out of it. At least that's how I do it. At any given time, I'm always clear where I see myself in 3 years' time. Maybe I was exposed to tools like defining a collage of yourself and things like those early in my career or early in my life journey. But, if you become an activist, I became politically active in high school at age 13. And it was really not something where you went out of your way to say, I'm now going to become a political activist. It was reacting to a system. Whether it's the repressive school principals we had, I was taught by soldiers at our school. It was a homeland semi-private school. So we had people from the army coming to teach us, whether it's biology, whether it's electronics, and so on. Half the time they didn't even speak good English.
Yes.
There's one we used to tease, Mr. Lyukov. He taught us fitting and turning. And he would say to us, so there's the wrench that you use it's got this zigzag pattern. So that zigzag pattern, there's a tool that makes it in the workshop. So he tried to describe it, so there's Hiri Dangasman that you use and so on. And he said, do you know him? And then we would laugh. And laughter meant getting a whip. And he says, okay, you don't know him. You must remember me in the workshop. I'll show him to you. And we would laugh at his broken English Afrikaans. But they were not really professional teachers. They were soldiers to come and watch over us in the political context of apartheid. And so if you could stand up to that Goliath, and remember they came to class, at the corner there's an R4 rifle. They're in uniform. And so you dare speak up. And so if you could speak up to that Goliath and come out good on the other side, if you could be locked up in a cell as a teenager and not lose yourself and maintain your sense of composture, purpose, and come out positive. Of course, there are others who had terrible experiences through interrogation where they were beaten up, some to a pulp, some to death. But if you emerge positive on the other side with a sense of resilience, then you grow up as an adult knowing nothing is impossible. But then also, if you have the kind of grandparents, aunts, and uncles that I had, who is sometimes in fear, they would say, Mpho, you should rather focus on your education to try and steer you away from activism. My maternal grandmother used to say to me, so she just knew that there was this island where they sent people to, but she didn't have a grasp of it's, although she was a teacher, that it's Robben Island. So she would say, I think she just looked at the map and say, what looks like the middle of nowhere? And she would say, child of my child, if you keep on this path, they're going to send you to St. Helena and we'll never find you. And so, there were efforts. And then I think somewhere some of the uncles realized, this is just the context in which he's growing up. You're not going to change it. Maybe help him figure out how to be resilient, because they themselves were generation 1976. They had gone through their journey. One of my uncles once sat me down after I came from prison. I was 17. Now I should have finished my matric at 16. Like you, I went to school early, but I started school earlier than you. I was 4.5. And we didn't have play school. So my parents had this notion that if I just followed other kids to school, I'll get used to the idea of school. And by the time I'm 5, going for 6 the following year, then they could enroll me. But mid-year, June, mid of the year, on my 5th birthday, my sub-A teacher says to them, you're wasting this child's time. He's coping well, enroll him. So I was actually enrolled mid-year, but having been accompanying other kids to school. So he sat me down, he said, look, there are 2 types of men in society. You've got to decide now which one you are. So I said, Uncle, what do you mean? He says, all of us are called men because we wear pants and there's a zip. But there are those who, in spite of being so-called men, don't have a sense of duty about them and a sense of responsibility about them. So which one are you going to be? And then he stood up and left me there. Later, we were watching the news. He says, now, have you figured it out? I said, well, I'm here and I'm doing my matric. He said, yeah, you better be the right one. And so every time, every quarter, he would come and sit me down and say, which one are you? Which one are you? Until I finished my matric. And he said, yeah, see, you got the lesson. So that sense of whatever you're grappling with, remember the right anchor and the right path, and always choose that right path. For me, is how I've overcome obstacles. You see it as, in fact, someone wrote a book entitled, I came across it in '93 at Ford, a bend on the road is not the end of the road. So you've got to flex with it and have the patience and tenacity to let that journey teach you whatever it came to, that chapter of the journey teach you what it came to teach you, embrace it and move on. But if you have long-term goals that you're striving towards, as I say, I grew up early in my studies and career knowing about how to use a collage to focus and visualize. So there was a time when I actually wrote down my goals in my bedroom where there's a free wall. I'd put a whole A4 paper there. I remember once while I was chief executive at Saatchi and Saatchi around 2001-2, thinking, so what after this? Because either I'm going to have to be a shareholder here and grow the stake to grow, but there was nothing left to grow to. And on my wall, I had become chairman of a mid-sized company in 5 years. And this was 2001-2. And one of my family members said, bold move. And I said, you've got to aspire. And 7 years later, in 2009, I became chair of Eskom, the largest company on the continent, not a mid-sized company. So the other pieces of work that I've read later would say you must just always tell the universe what you aspire for. The universe will converge and take you there. And not worry about, is it tomorrow, is it yesterday? Just put it out there, live your life, work, focus conscientiously in that direction. The universe carries you there. So you've got to have a sense of hope. I think that believing in a higher force than yourself is important. That we don't all have to be Christians. We don't all have to be Muslims. Each have whatever heritage they have, but whatever heritage you have a sense of how it anchors you and draws you out on a path of optimism. Because all the faiths are based on love and self-love. And all the faiths are based on the fact that if you transmit love into the universe, you will receive love back. Whether it's Christianity, whether it's Hinduism, all of them are about that. And therefore, if you make sure that you tap into that positive energy, my humble view, and I know it's going to sound rich, is you don't have to find yourself trapped in depression and anxiety. You just have to stay hopeful and believe. But you've got to visualize it. Having a visual sense of where I'm going, for me, is the ultimate thing that pulls you forward.
We're talking here, and I've really got a strong sense of who you are at your core. You know, through our three conversations, your core values, what anchors you, what holds you together. I really have got a strong sense of that. If I had to meet you for the first time, and I didn't have the benefit of your biography, your resume, and I had to ask you the question, who is Mpho Makwana? How would you answer that?
Well, let me tell you how people say they experience me. The average person say there's a serious facade that they see. And then they get surprised when they see the warmth, experience the warmth, and so on. There's people that see, I guess, the firstborn composture. The book by Kevin Lehman says that firstborns are always sort of presentable, trim and proper, because we were all drummed in to show up properly, shirt tucked in and all those things. But once they then get to experience the person, they feel they misjudged who they were meeting for the first time. But I think for me, how I think and hope I show up is I'm an open-minded, non-judgmental sort of person. I never fixate my mind on a thing until I experience. So I've learned early, I guess, being a change facilitator early in your career teaches you to suspend your judgment and immerse yourself and then formulate direction of travel once you're in the process. But I do have a sense of impatience in that I generally can see where things are going 3-5 steps ahead. So if we're taking too long to get there, it irks me. You know, in your realm of profiling on the Enneagram, I'm in Enneagram 1. Yeah. So I am a perfectionist. I want things done properly and in a certain direction quickly. So I can be impatient with people who are perhaps verbose, that sometimes you, in the presence of people who enjoy the sounds of their voices more than the substance that they're carrying, transmitting through their voices. And people like those will generally maybe find me as intolerant, impatient, and it's simply because I think when we're a team, there's a task at hand, there's a direction at hand, let's focus. When there's distractions, I get impatient. As I said, 3 conversations ago, I've been conscientized early not to be hurtful. But perhaps if my 2 partners were here, my life partners would say I tend to snap at them. But it's simply that I expect, because if I transmit what I know, I expect us all to grow at the same pace and to absorb at the same pace. So if I see things as basic and as things that I think we would have been exposed to jointly or otherwise, if you have not caught along, then yeah, I do get impatient. But I do think that I'm a nurturer. I do think that a lot of people have found me to be like a grinding stone where they've come and sharpened their swords. I do enjoy it when I see people thrive. I don't believe in being the only successful person in the room. And for me, that's what being this trusted counselor is about. I behaved in the Myers-Briggs thing. I behaved like a plant without knowing that there's something called being a plant.
Yeah.
I generally am the person in the room in a meeting that people would undermine and think, gee, this person is quiet. There's this thing called nobody home syndrome. Until that time comes to redirect the conversation and people kind of like, where were you all along? But it's not my nature to be over present. And hopefully that's a quality that people find useful in the boardrooms that I participate and serve in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.